I want to hear cannons. Downfield, pull up, ball to the 5, touchdown Tampa Bay. Mike Evans does it again. Fire the cannons, Bucs.
It's first and goal. That's picked off. That's picked off. And who else? Rondé Barber. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers may ride to the Super Bowl with that one.
Third down, 18. Dropping Gannon, looking Gannon. Those up with the heads in the shot. 30. Derek Brooks 30. Brooks to the 25, 20. Derek Brooks all the way. There it is. The dagger's in. We're going to win the Super Bowl. And there the cannons go. Fire them. Keep on firing them. Keep on firing them.
All right, so I am joined by Evan and Rhett from the Cannon Fire podcast. Love the name. Always get a kick out of podcast names. How we doing, guys?
Doing well.
Doing good.
Yeah, appreciate you having us on. Ready to talk some ball and preview, I think, the best uniform matchup any of us are ever going to see for a long time.
Yep, you stole my thunder. That's where we're going to start. I'm going to throw this up on the screen here. I mean, this is the biggest storyline of the week, right? I mean, this is at the very least going to be the most aesthetically pleasing game on the docket this weekend in the NFL. It's got to be. That's gorgeous.
Yeah, I'm the resident uniform snob over on our show, and I've been dreaming about this one ever since they announced it. I remember that actually before it was even announced, it was kind of a foregone conclusion that, like, hey, they're going to play the Expansion Bowl this year.
Yeah.
Seattle's also celebrating a 50th anniversary. They also have a throwback uniform. Wouldn't that be really cool? And then they end up announcing it, and it's like, oh my God, it feels straight up out of a video game just because of how rarely the NFL does fun stuff with uniforms now. But they're leaning into to the new retro takeover, and I appreciate it. These are two of the finest throwbacks in the NFL right now.
It really is the biggest no-brainer of all no-brainers. Like one of my, I used to think I didn't care about uniforms, but they've become such a thing. And like, for example, this rivalries uniform thing, like some of them look really cool. I don't understand why they're not wearing them in the same game. To me, that makes no sense. Somebody dropped the ball there, but really looking forward to this weekend. I'll tell you this, guys, and I know that neither of you can say the same, just looking at you, but I'm old enough to remember 1976. I've seen games in these original uniforms from that year. And the funny thing about how uniforms evolve and our tastes evolve, back then we thought they were ugly, right? The creamsicles were hideous, and those throwbacks the Seahawks wore, I thought were ugly. But, they weren't all tight fitting back then, and we had the big shoulder pads and the neck rolls and everything else. Let's talk some football. And we can't really talk about anything without talking about injuries. The Seahawks injury report just came out. Julian Love, Devin Witherspoon still not practicing. That's a big concern from our end here because they came out of the Cardinals game last Thursday, and we didn't get any indication that they aggravated anything. They were able to finish the game. But over on the Tampa Bay side, we're still waiting for that injury report to come out as we record this, but it's a long list. What are your biggest concerns?
It definitely is. And look, I mean, the Bucs have been dealing with stuff seemingly throughout the entire season, right? I mean, you start the season without Tristan Wirfs, without Chris Godwin, so you're already starting to shuffle on the fly a little bit here. The offensive line there's a bunch of dudes. At one point, they literally had nobody in the right spot. Like they only had 2 starters of their 5 expected guys on the line, and so injuries have been an issue, and it really hasn't slowed down. And that's a problem, right? Obviously, Bucky Irving, a pretty big one this week, got injured in the Eagles game, was able to finish that Eagles game. Actually, I believe got injured then after that, ended up scoring that 72-yard touchdown, but did get banged up. Probably doubting that he plays in this game. Just doesn't really seem like the Buccaneers have much confidence there. He wasn't a walking boot earlier this week. So a guy like Baker Mayfield, who also did not practice on Wednesday. The Bucs actually didn't hold a practice on Wednesday. They did a walkthrough because Todd Bowles had basically said that had they tried to practice, he wasn't exactly sure if they would even have enough guys to be able to hold a practice that they wanted to have. So that's where the Bucs injuries are at right now. So just trying to hope to, get out of this game as healthy as possible and move on to the next, to be honest with you.
And
The Baker thing was a surprise, right? Nobody saw that coming.
He's been dealing with a biceps, but I think the other one, so he's listed with a knee as well. Yeah. And that was maybe a little bit alarming that, like, hey, it's not just the bicep, it's also something else. So that may be a little bit alarming, but I mean, it's going to take a lot to have that guy miss a game. It is going to take a lot. There's been times where he's gone down and I thought, he might be out for a little bit. And he comes back like the very next series.
Yeah, There was a time he went down a couple of weeks ago, and we thought he was going to miss a few games, and he just stood right back up and was chopping right back at Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. The unofficial report from this morning, unofficial/official, it's from trusted sources here, but no official injury report yet. These are all the players that were listed on Tampa's injury report as of Wednesday. Mike Evans, Bucky Irving, Jamel Dean, Benjamin Morrison, Christian Izien, Baker Mayfield, Tristan Wirfs, Levante David, Chris Godwin, Zion McCollum, Hassan Reddick, Tyke Smith, Logan Hall, Greg Gaines, Charlie Heck, Sterling Shepard. None of those guys practiced on Wednesday.
Wow.
Of those names, as of today, who did return to practice was Baker Mayfield, Tristan Wirfs, Levante David, Chris Godwin, Zion McCollum, Hassan Reddick, Tyke Smith, Logan Hall, Greg Gaines, Charlie Heck, Sterling Shepard. So a majority of the list, which is good news for Bucs fans. Once that injury report drops, we'll kind of find out what capacity they practice. But the fact that they are out there gives you a vote of confidence that they are going to play. As far as the guys not practicing still, though, Mike Evans is an obvious one, expected to miss a few more weeks with that aggravated hamstring injury. Bucky Irving, kind of like Evan said, I also doubt that he's going to play. The only update we got this week was kind of a nothing burger. You know, it was just waiting on opinions, waiting on more information. So I think it'll be that until it isn't. Jamel Dean, probably going to be sidelined a couple of weeks. And then on top of that, Benjamin Morrison, I don't expect him to play as of right now. He still does have time because the Bucs aren't going to rule anybody out. But this creates an interesting situation in the Buccaneers secondary because Jamel Dean, Benjamin Morrison, Christian Izien, if you assume all of those guys are going to miss this game, you're talking about moving some guys around. Like, I think that we have a couple of corners that could be called up, whether it's a Bryce Hall or it's a Kendall Vildor. I'm curious who they would give the nod in that situation. But you're also talking about, moving our nickel corner, Jacob Parrish. I know he's a rookie, but he's been a very strong part of this defense so far this season. So you talk about potentially kicking Parrish outside to try and compensate for no Dean, no Morrison, and then you bring a safety out of position. Maybe a Tyke Smith is a guy who comes down and plays your nickel corner. I'm not really sure how they want to address it. Hopefully, I think Christian Izien, of those three guys between Dean, Morrison, and Izien, he probably has the best chance to go, but like the details on his injury seem kind of murky too. So I'm not really sure. But the fact that we have a substantial amount of guys back at practice today in some capacity allows everybody to exhale just a little bit.
Yeah. Vildor, you mentioned there, former Seahawk, a whole bunch of Northwest UW Seahawk connections here in this game. We'll talk about some of those as we go along, but the biggest connection are the similarities in the quarterbacks playing for these teams. It's pretty remarkable when you look back. 2018, of course, Baker, the first pick overall by the Browns. Sam Darnold goes number 3 that year to the Jets. Doesn't work out for either of them there. They cross paths in Carolina for a year. Like, how bad did the Panthers fumble that one? And then their career arcs, even though Baker, except for the 1 year that he played on 3 teams, has always had a starting spot. Sam had to sit and watch for a little bit. But similar career arcs, and here they are, both playing on essentially the same type of contract also today after Baker played for just 1 year and $4 million in 2023. Let me ask you this, first of all, and get both your opinions. When they initially signed him that year, what did you think of the move?
There was, I think, a little bit of, the Bucs where they were, right? Tom Brady retires. You're kind of looking for what the next step is. And there's a lot of opinions, right? Whether it's, do you go the draft route? Do you try and maybe keep pushing the chips in, right? Maybe instead of taking a chance on a reclamation project or drafting a young guy, do you go after a veteran, a Derek Carr, and Aaron Rodgers? Like, do you go that route? There's a lot of different opinions. And I think there were some people that were obviously a little bit concerned with Baker Mayfield. I mean, after all, it didn't work out in Cleveland. He goes to Carolina, doesn't even last the entire year in Carolina, gets cut, and then goes to the Rams and plays okay. So I think there were some people that saw what he did with the Rams and were maybe a little bit more hopeful. But overall, I think there was a lot of people in like wait and see mode, basically. And I think obviously the contract, it was a 1 year deal, wasn't a ton of money. There wasn't a lot of risk, involved there. And honestly, like throughout training camp, Baker Mayfield, it was close between him and Kyle Trask with the quarterback position. Baker did not start off great. And I think, slowly but surely, about maybe towards the mid-season part of the 2023 season, he really won a lot of Bucs fans over.
I would argue it took him even longer than that to win most of the fan base over, because recency bias is a hell of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys remember some of the stuff they were saying about Baker Mayfield when he was, when he got released from Carolina? I know that he demanded his release. Maybe there's some argument over how that fell out, but like, he was not viewed in a very favorable light. And even after that short stint in LA, there was a little bit of a second wind for him. But like, most people had agreed that he was backup QB at best, right? He's going to be that guy for the rest of his career. And I mean, you heard it about Darnold.
Mhm.
It was tough for that guy to escape the Jets.
Yeah.
And, to kind of claw his way back into relevance with the way he's played these last couple of seasons. Baker has done everything and then some that the Bucs asked him and expected him to do. And with that being said, we've got two of the most productive seasons of his career now. And I think that that's been more than enough to really win over most of the Bucs fans. But at first, that 2023 season and even some of 24, anytime that you would see those kind of, same old Baker mistakes creep back into his game, people love to rush to the comments and say, this guy's not it. They need to make a move. He's clearly not the answer here. They need to draft somebody. And I'm ultimately glad that it worked out the way that it did. I was cautiously optimistic at first with Baker, but he won me over by the end of that season. 2024, I was all aboard, and then this year he's playing the way that he has so far. Had his first real brain fart that cost him last week against Philly with that end zone interception. That's a bad backbreaker. It can't happen, but it happens in the NFL, and you kind of live and die by the sword with the style of QB that Baker is. So.
Right.
He's just easy to root for. So I'm happy that it has seemingly worked out for all parties here.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that there was a moment there after Carolina cut him that he was in total limbo. And I remember at the time you went on a big podcast during that break before he signed with the Rams and said that he thought the Seahawks were in play. Things we could have these alternate universes. Things could have been flipped around maybe if they had fallen just a little bit different when they did. You talked about live or die by the sword. One of the things you live by is his scrappiness, his ability to bring a team back even when you don't think he has a chance, right? The first 3 weeks, last drive victories, almost pulled it off against the Eagles again last week. But the commonality in those 4 weeks is slow starts on offense, just 13 points in the first quarter, only one touchdown. What do you attribute that to?
Right now, I think a lot of your injuries hurt it. They're not really playing with a lot of continuity, obviously, along the offensive line, especially, in Atlanta week 1, they rolled out an entirely new offensive line where it was Graham Barton and not at center. He's at left tackle, and Ben Bredesen, the left guard, is now at center. And they were playing Mike Jordan, who 2 weeks before that was on their practice squad. It wasn't even on their roster in the offseason. It was really a reshuffled line. And, I think you have an offensive coordinator trying to find his footing. I think all that combined with, I naturally think sometimes defenses can be ahead of offenses, especially early in the season. So I think when you have that, you might have some slow starts, and the Bucs have been able to overcome their slow starts except last week. And when you're playing a really good team like Philly, you can't. Bowles even said in his post-game press conference, you can't spot them 14 points and expect to win the game, especially on special teams, which has been an issue. But yeah, the offense definitely needs to start better. And it's not going to get any easier, right? Mike Evans is not going to play in this game. Bucky Irving might end up missing this game. So it's certainly not going to get any easier. So the Bucs are going to have to find a way to, sustain drives and, keep the defense off the field there.
Now, the good news since then, Barton back at center, Tristan Wirfs back. How close to 100% do you think Wirfs is?
Pretty close. I thought he looked pretty good, on Sunday against Philly. I thought he, maybe not Tristan Wirfs level yet, but I think he'll get there pretty quickly. And I thought the offensive line as a whole was okay. They sort of broke down towards the end of the game on the last couple of plays there, and the Bucs had the turnover on downs. But for the most part, I thought Wirfs looked okay, and I think he, the more he plays, the more he's going to get back into it.
Yeah, and Evan, you had kind of touched on a lot of what holds this Buccaneers offense back as of right now is just missing pieces. A crazy stat here. The Bucs, I know I've been throwing this around a lot, but it blows my mind because I really didn't think of it this way. As of right now, Mike Evans has only missed 13 NFL games in his career. He is now probably going to miss 14, not going to play against Seattle, but the Bucs are 3-10 without Mike Evans. And, I think a good way to describe how this offense looks, all of those things that Evan said are valid and true. But at the end of the day, when you look at like their performance against Philly and you look at how inept they were in that first quarter, yeah, you had a couple of explosive plays that they made out of structure, right? 270+ yard touchdowns, which are great. But they looked like an offense without Mike Evans. You're missing your top skill guy in that wide receiver room. And people are going to say whatever they want because maybe Mike Evans isn't the most flashy receiver in the NFL, but he's consistent and he garners that double team attention that opens things up for everybody else, because it still feels like the Bucs have a wealth of riches in the wide receiver room. But I think with Emeka Egbuka now getting double team coverage for the first time in his career, the Eagles were very sticky in the secondary last week. So like they had a really good game in that regard. Regardless, Cooper DeJean is a stud. Even though Quinyon Mitchell held the hell out of us, he had a strong game apparently. So with that being said, I think, Josh Grizzard really has to get into his bag and how he gets, some more guys involved in the pass game. They've done it with Bucky, but he may not be available this week. They haven't done it a lot with the tight ends so far this season, but that's also just necessity at this point. Again, this reshuffled offensive line, the injuries that are popping up, you've got guys that are being asked to do different things than they would if this offense was more healthy than it is. And they're getting there. But again, with these injuries that keep popping up, a Bucky Irving popping up, it might take a little bit.
You mentioned Emeka Egbuka, sort of a homecoming for him. He was born and raised in Tacoma, played his high school football here. What a revelation he's been his rookie season. Also the connection, we showed it in the graphic, right? At the beginning with the throwback uniforms, JSN, Egbuka, two of the best to ever do it at Ohio State. And that's really saying something with the history they have there at the receiver position. 18 catches, 282 yards, 4 touchdowns. I think he's third in the league with targets of 20 plus air yards. So clearly a guy that can make up for the loss of Evans at least a little bit. And coming out of the draft process, this was a guy that the knock on him from critics was not really an outside receiver, slot only, can't get deep. Same things we heard about JSN his first couple of years in the league. And now look what both of them are doing. Ibuka's been great.
No, he certainly has. And look, I mean, it was a surprise to everybody, right, when the Buccaneers selected him in 19th overall. I think we had sort of talked about it on our show as kind of like a tongue-in-cheek, just like, yeah, they could, but they're not going to, so, like, whatever. And then they end up drafting a wide receiver with their first-round pick. And a lot of people were confused, right? I mean, you had just re-signed Chris Godwin. You could have easily let Chris Godwin walk and maybe spent money elsewhere. You decided to bring him back. You still have Mike Evans. You had Jalen McMillan, who was coming off a pretty strong rookie season. Jalen McMillan, obviously from Washington, won't play in this game, but did go to college in Washington. Bucs have, like you mentioned, Bucs have a few Huskies on their team, but and then there are a lot of people that were confused. But I think if you ask those same people now, I don't really think they're going to be complaining much, because Emeka Egbuka has been just as advertised, if not better. Obviously, and he's making clutch plays, right? Obviously, the game winner against Atlanta, the big time play against Philly. Yeah, it's a great throw, great concentration on the catch, right? And really a spark, because by that point it was still 24-6. So, the Bucs offense was still kind of in a lull a little bit, and that really provided him a spark. So that's what Egbuka has brought to the table. And you're right, without Chris Godwin for the first couple of games, now without Mike Evans for these games, having Egbuka be productive has been really important. And I'm not sure where this offense would be if he wasn't.
And then Godwin back now. They really tried to get him involved last week. 10 targets, just 3 catches. How close does he look to the player he was before the injury after, a couple of years of real tough luck, serious injuries for him?
I think it's going to take, at the very least 5 or 6 more weeks. And maybe that sounds like a lot, but, for Chris Godwin, he's a guy who's been in this situation before. He's had to overcome a season-ending injury and come out on the other side of it, arguably a stronger player. But, there was one season where he came back and didn't look 100%, still made some Chris Godwin-like plays because he's just that good of a receiver. But, I think it was 2023 where he came back from injury and wasn't full speed. 2024, last season, those first few weeks of the season, he was one of the most productive wide receivers in the NFL. I mean, he was on an absolute tear. And unfortunately, he suffers that ankle injury. It ends his season. So here he is once again. But I think his presence out there is still huge for this Buccaneers offense, because, he still has enough juice. He still has enough talent to go out there and make the plays. I think last week, call it a combination of like ring rust and, the Eagles playing good in their secondary. But I think 3, 4, 5 weeks from now, he's going to look much faster and much more like he used to than the player we saw against Philly last week.
Before we talk about the defense, let's talk about the offense as a whole and how you both feel about that unit, injuries and all, going up against this Mike Macdonald defense now, his second full year in Seattle, and a defense that by just about every major metric, even with a couple of guys out in the secondary over the first few weeks, top 3 in just about every category in the league.
Yeah, I mean, look, Mike Macdonald's been really good for Seattle, right? And a lot of Ravens fans are probably missing him right now, right? Based on how the Ravens defense has played.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of Ravens fans, I'm sure, that are clamoring for him to come back. But yeah, I mean, look, I think the Bucs offense is making strides. I think they're going in the right direction. However, that doesn't mean that this isn't going to be a challenge, right? You're on the road in a tough environment. You got to travel, like all the way across the country. You're probably going to be without Bucky Irving. You're definitely without Mike Evans. And the offensive line is still, I mean, we talk about getting Tristan Wirfs back, but they're still without Cody Mauch. He's going to be out for the season. They're without right tackle Luke Gedeke still as well. So the offensive line is still a little shaky. And I think obviously starting fast is going to be a point of emphasis, I think, for them. But also that's a pretty good defense over there. And Seattle's played some really good football so far this season. And I think it's going to be a challenge. But I think if the Bucs can start off a little bit faster and maybe get the ball out of Baker's hands quick, have him not take as many hits, obviously, on the injury report, so he's a little bit banged up. Have him not take as many hits and just let him get into a rhythm. I think that they could end up, finding some success here, but it's certainly going to be a challenge.
I'm a little concerned about the run game. I know Bucky Irving is a glaring omission in this Buccaneers offense with how impactful he's been, and Rachaad White is no slouch. Let me say that with no disrespect to him. He's been here longer than Bucky. He's Buccaneer draft pick, and he's very good in pass protection. He's arguably had a really, really strong start to the season as well. The Bucs had a nice little streak going, I think, until last week. I don't remember off the top of my head if they still had it, but first 3 weeks of the year, they had over 100 yards rushing. And at no point did it feel like it ever took over the game, but it kept them in the game. It extends drives, it keeps the clock ticking. You're eating away at clock, and then you're just moving the football methodically down the field. And it feels like there's an element of that may or may not be missing. The last time the Buccaneers had, any other running back kind of pop off that wasn't Bucky Irving was against the Saints last year, Evan, when they put up 51 in New Orleans. And that was Sean Tucker was NFC Offensive Player of the Week. So they talked about bringing up Josh Williams and having him dress as the third running back for this game. I'm curious about the running back usage. Rachaad is very strong. And I think that, honestly, at the end of the year, he'll be a free agent that is going to get paid. I don't know if it's going to be in Tampa. I don't think it's going to be in Tampa. But somebody will be getting a very, very good running back in Rachaad White. I don't know how things are going to fall into place this week, because Bucky at times just makes it look easy. And I don't know. Rachaad White is kind of, he's been hot and cold as far as running the football. Would you not agree, Evan?
Yeah, for sure. And he's going to be a very important piece, and so is Sean Tucker. So I think you could see a little bit of both of them. But yeah, the run game definitely can help out all aspects of it, and hopefully they can get going.
As if the sleeper deal wasn't good enough, 100% match on your first deposit up to $100. Look over there on the side. They're going to give you an extra $20 for signing up. No deposit needed. Just a bonus to try out the Sleeper app. And guys, even if you don't want to play those games, you can do anything else. You can play fantasy sports. You can pick games like we're doing in the Seahawks Forever Pick'em League. If you want to get in on the prop picks, take advantage of that deal. Terms and conditions do apply. Legal in 25 states. But the rest of the stuff, man, you want to follow along the Seahawk game or any other game in the NFL and you can't get to a TV, their play-by-play real-time updates are the best in the business. You can react to every play and you can chat with the other fans in the community. Check out the Sleeper app today. Now, on the other side of the ball, you guys mentioned there's a whole bunch of UW Huskies on this roster, former Huskies, Kate Otten, even on the offensive side. You have to account for Vita Vea when you're going up against this Buccaneers defense. He's such a force in the middle. Doesn't sound like we might see Greg Gaines also this week, another former Husky. but who are some of the guys that this Clint Kubiak-led offense now that's been rebuilt, 6 new starters from a year ago, obviously a new quarterback? Who are the guys they're going to have to account for the most on that side?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, I'll take this really quick. Vita Vea has been really good. Had a great game against Philly. Really was probably their best defensive lineman, against Philly. But also, I mean, a guy like Yaya Diaby off the edge, he's been up and down this season, played pretty well against the Jets, was not really a factor against Philly. They're going to need an edge rush, right, in this game, I think. I think when you look back at, whatever time the game is over, I think who's going to end up winning this game, I think is going to be who's going to be able to put the most pressure on the opposing quarterback. And if the Bucs can do that consistently, I think their defense can have some success, but it's not going to be easy because at times the Bucs have struggled to consistently get pressure with 4 guys. Now, they have improved on this since last year. Last year was pretty bad, but they have gotten better at getting pressure with just 4, not having to rely on the blitz to get that pressure. So I think when you're looking at it, a guy like Diaby is going to have to step up. A guy like Gervais Dennis in the linebacker position is going to have to play a lot better than he has. And then obviously in the secondary, right, with the guys banged up that they have, potentially without Dean, Benjamin Morrison, Zion McCollum is going to have to step up now. They just paid him a couple weeks ago, right before the season, and hopefully, he can step up and play well. Because again, Seattle's got some pretty good pass catchers also.
I got to tell you, you brought up the interior defensive line. You have to bring up Vita Vea because, he accounts for like 2 people, right? 350 pounds. But I have been very, very pleasantly surprised in the interior defensive lineman behind him. The Bucs have a rookie, and they have another guy named Elijah Simmons, who they signed 2 weeks ago from the Cardinals practice squad. And you talked about Greg Gaines going down. I'm never going to say that a player getting injured is a good thing, but a good thing that came out of it is, one, we are getting a much better look at Buccaneers rookie Elijah Roberts. And Elijah Simmons, man, I really cannot say enough good things about these 2 guys. Sample size is everything with Simmons, especially. I think he's only played 25, 26 snaps. But it felt like last week I was at the game watching them play Philadelphia. And, at a certain point when it's 24-6, you're almost checked out, so you're not paying as close of attention. But I remember in that second half when the Bucs defense really started turning it on, we're all looking around and we usually know the players, but we're looking up and we're like, who the hell's number 92? Because he was in the backfield just bullying guys. He has been big in run support. He does have some pass rush chops. He was, getting a hand in some of those sacks, but on top of that, Elijah Roberts was he was an edge rusher in college, and the Bucs kicked him inside. And he's been nice, and I like to see those guys get reps. Excuse me. On top of that, with Jacob Parrish, the other rookie corner here, I think it's going to be interesting to see where he trots out for this Buccaneers defense if they decide to move him outside. But if they play him at the nickel, he's another one to watch out for, solely because Todd Bowles has been using him in some fun and dynamic ways, and he's been hitting the quarterback. He's been tackling guys behind the line of scrimmage. He's very physical, and he's a young player, but as of this recording, from the nickel corner position, he leads all NFL rookies in sacks and tackles for loss. So he's not necessarily a flashy position, but he should 100% be getting Defensive Player of the Year consideration right now, even though he's not. He's been playing very well.
I'm glad you mentioned Diaby. You might have seen me wince a little bit a couple of years ago when he came out. He was a guy that I loved in the draft out of Louisville, correct? Yep. And in fact, there was a post-draft press conference that, that all teams do every year after each day. And John Schneider said, well, we got sniped a couple of times today, and we were looking for pass rushers that year. He went right, I think, a couple of spots before one of the Seahawks selections, and I think he was a guy that was in their crosshairs. So I think they ended up with Derek Hall in the same draft. So it worked out okay for both teams, but a guy that I've really liked. And then we can't talk about the Tampa Bay defense without talking about the ageless wonder, Levante David. Honestly, guys, when I looked at the depth chart this morning, I wasn't even sure he was still playing. I think he was playing when these creamsicle uniforms were originally used. I think he's been around that long, but just a guy that keeps showing up and doing it. Like, what can you say about a player like that? We got to experience here with Bobby Wagner, but we didn't let him stay for his entire career either, and the Bucs clearly won't let him get out the door.
I think that there is a lot to say about Lavonte David, and what you have to start with is all of the great things that we have seen. Unfortunately, because of guys like Bobby Wagner and Luke Kuechly, I don't think Lavonte David got the Pro Bowls or the All Pros that he may have deserved during that time period, because those three guys are some of the most prolific linebackers to ever suit up, and they really define that generation, in my opinion. But he has been, behind Derek Brooks, probably the most impactful Buccaneers linebacker in history. With that being said, it has been a rough start to the 2025 campaign for our beloved Lavonte David, and it hurts to say. It really does, but we have talked about it on our show almost week in and week out, and we were hoping that 2 weeks ago it was kind of one of those, all right, let's, shake out of it kind of thing, but, I just think that you know what I'm getting at here, Evan. You know exactly what I'm getting at.
Just Father Time finally catching up with him.
He gets everybody.
Yeah. He, I mean,
caught up with me, guys. I'm telling you, he's coming for you too.
Yeah, I mean, look, last year, one of the biggest things that sort of towards the end of the year you noticed was pass coverage maybe wasn't as clean as we've been accustomed to seeing from Lavonte David.
That's his calling card.
It's been, and like sometimes the middle of the field for opposing teams was just wide open because the Bucs had KJ Britt at linebacker last year. That experiment didn't work, and Lavonte had slowed down there. So, but last year he was still pretty strong, when going downhill. He was still a pretty short tackler. This year, though, especially his tackling, that's the biggest thing for me that I've seen. There's been a couple of times where, man, it feels like that's a tackle he makes 99 out of 100, but he didn't that time. And he also missed that one, and he missed that one, like starting to pile up a little bit. So I'm not going to say, I don't think he's been bad to start the season, but for Lavonte David standards, it's certainly not up to that level. And I do think the Buccaneers may be a tad bit concerned as the season goes on, right? Because we still got a lot of football left to be played. I do wonder if they're maybe a little concerned about it.
And maybe there is that feeling of like a magnifying glass on the issue solely because of how bad the Bucs have been at linebacker this entire season. This is a defensive unit that I would argue is vastly improved compared to last year. Linebacker is still an issue, right? That's a huge weakness week in and week out. The middle of the field, these big chunk plays where guys are just missing in coverage. Player execution is a big part of it. Scheme is another part of it, but it's now an issue, and I think people are. I don't know.
I'm putting in my notes here.
Still our guy. 54 forever, man. He's still our guy. Still a Bucs Ring of Honor member at the end of the day, and should be a Hall of Famer. But that's going to be a long conversation, I think.
So attack Lavonte David right in the Thanks. You guys are going to get in some trouble. I will say that this is how long he's been in the league. He was drafted the same year as Russell Wilson.
It's crazy.
That's how long it's been.
That is crazy.
Yeah. A couple of eras ago here in Seattle. Let me ask for this. I don't really ask for predictions. So let me get from both of you, scale of 1 to 10, your confidence level, 10 being the highest, your confidence level with the Bucs traveling across country, coming off a physical game against the Eagles, all the injuries, everything else, facing the Seahawks on Sunday.
I'm going to go with a 6. And the reason I'm going to go slightly above average is, one, I think I would feel much better about this game. Obviously, if the Buccaneers were healthier. That's first and foremost. They might not have the dudes available to do it, right? Like it's really gonna. We saw what it looked like without Mike Evans in the first half there last week. Now, not only you're not gonna have Mike Evans, you'll probably take out Bucky Irving as well. So that is concerning. Going across the country is concerning, and playing a good team, right, and a pretty good defense. So the one reason why it is above average, though, and why I put it at a 6 is I think the way last week ended with them sort of getting punched in the mouth early and fighting back, but coming up just a little bit short. I think this is an angry football team that I think sort of wants to get that taste out of their mouths, right? They were 3-0. 3-0 for the first time since 2005. They had not been 3-0 for a long time, suffered their first loss here. And in a game where you really, if you would have beaten the Eagles, you could have really made a statement, right? That like, you're the top dog in the NFC, one of the top dogs in the NFL. You don't do that. I think this is a team that's a little upset right now. And that's why I think they're going to come out and play with a little bit of passion here and maybe come up with a W.
Very much like Evan said, the part about, this being a good team, but just not having the dudes to do it right now is the overwhelming feeling, especially in the offensive side of the ball. It feels like they're almost, I hate to say it, in a sense, limping into this game on offense because, again, they haven't fully figured things out. They haven't had, as good of a game on offense so far this season as you would have liked with just consistency. They haven't been very good at playing complementary football for all 4 quarters, and that's obviously going to be an issue. But with that being said, I'll go 6.5, by the way, just maybe a hair above Evan because I'm the eternal optimist as well on the show. I'll go 6.5 with the injuries aside. What I have seen from the Bucs and really what I've seen from head coach Todd Bowles, I think this gets overlooked because a lot of people want to fire the guy every other week, but I think that Todd Bowles, dare I say it, I don't want to say he's taken a step because that feels like too much. That feels like too much credit. But I think that so far this season, I've already seen them win a couple of games that they would have lost in other years. And with as scrappy as they were, I know it was kind of, the cardiac kids with those last-minute wins in the first 3 weeks, but I think that those are gutsy wins. And I think it's just when you have a team that is able to buy in like that, and consistently believe that they're not out of it. Listen, I've been to a lot of Bucs games, man. I have never, ever wanted to leave at halftime more than I did last week. I was ready to go home. I was like, I'm getting the hell out of here. I got better things to do. I could be sitting in the AC at home watching us get our ass kicked right now. And they made it a game. They made it fun in the second half, despite all the injuries that we've been talking about for the entire show. So it's hard for me to see this team drop 2 in a row here, but it's early on in the season. A lot of people say the NFL season doesn't start until week 8. So I wouldn't be shocked at all if they drop this game, to be honest with you. It took them 50 years to get their first win in that white creamsicle uniform. So, I mean, it could be a rare occurrence, So I'll go 6.5. But I think this is going to be an entertaining game regardless. These are 2 very talented teams, 2 very good defenses, in my opinion, too.
Yeah, I think one of you touched on it earlier. I do kind of think that the big key to this game is going to be which team pressures the other quarterback and which quarterback responds to it. Both Darnold and Baker have done very well through 4 games against pressure. Both teams are in the top 5 in pressure rate, while both offensive lines are in the bottom third of the league in pass block win rate. So kind of strength against weakness there on both sides of the ball. It may ultimately come down to that. But it just feels like one of those games with all the similarities and the uniforms. It's going to be a beautiful day in Seattle, about as well as you can expect in mid-October, 69 degrees and sunny. So those uniforms are going to be in all their glory. It feels like one of those games that almost deserves to go down to the final possession or 2, which both these teams have played multiple games like that this season. I did want to, before I let you go, mention some of the other connections. We've already listed a whole bunch of them, but there's more. John Schneider, Jason Licht, best friends. They've become very, very close over the years. I've seen them both speaking in interviews on features done about the other guy. We mentioned all the UW guys, and then there was one more that I thought your new starting right tackle with the injury there, Charlie Heck, his father, Andy, 1989, a first-round draft pick of the Seahawks, of course, now the offensive line coach in Kansas City. So there's probably more that I'm forgetting or not getting to, but things run pretty deep, and usually that leads to an entertaining game, and I think it'll be that on the field regardless of the injuries. Guys, this was great. I really appreciate doing it, and there's a good chance we could have an opportunity to do this again. This game could come down to something we look back on 12, 13 weeks from now when it comes down to NFC playoff seeding. These 2 teams this could be the first of 2 meetings potentially.
I agree.
No, for sure. Yeah, no, it's in the NFC, everything's pretty tight. So I would not be shocked at all if the Buccaneers are seeing the Seahawks yet again.
Pump your podcast. Let everybody know where they can watch your stuff.
You can find us on Cannon Fire Podcast on all platforms, YouTube, any of the audio platforms as well. If you prefer to listen, we're on social media: Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All of those are Cannon Fire Podcast. You can follow my co-host Evan on Instagram at at Bucs_daily. You can also find him on Twitter at EvanNFL and check out his written work at BucsNation.com. And last but not least, you can find myself, Instagram and Twitter at Retticus, RHETTAKUS. If you follow me, I will follow you back. And please check out the Rondé Barber Show. I have the pleasure of producing that every single week, and we're having a lot of fun with it. So it's a very cool project, and yeah, appreciate you having us on again, man. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to this game.
And for those of you who are watching on YouTube instead of listening, I will put those links to their page and their social handles down below in the description as well. Guys, thanks. Maybe we'll see you again in a few months.
Appreciate you. Thank you, sir.